Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with the new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Merry Christmas from me, my family, and everyone in the larger Military Images family, all of our senior editors, contributing editors, and everyone that is involved with the publication and all that we do. Thanks so much for your support. To celebrate this day, I want to tell a story. That is, I would like to tell a story that the soldier pictured here told us in his 1875 book, collection of short stories titled The Man in the Moon and Other People. There are several Christmas stories in there. His name is Captain Rossiter Worthington Raymond. His life dates are 1840 to 1918. He was a Renaissance man, did a little bit of everything, college educated, was a writer, a businessman. During the war, he was an aide on the staff of Major General John C. Frémont. Those of you who have watched these videos may have seen the one I did about a month ago. It was the first story in the collection, The Man in the Moon. There's several of those Christmas stories, as I mentioned. The Man in the Moon was one of them. I want to read one today on Christmas Day that is titled The Christmas Angel. It's a relatively short story. It's intended for children, teaching valuable lessons. But as I read it, it occurred to me that some of the lessons in there are just as applicable to adults. So I'm going to read it for you now. So enjoy The Christmas Angel by Captain Rossiter Worthington Raymond. Once upon a time, a little princess, whose name was Theodosia, awoke early in the morning, and as she lay in her soft bed, she heard the chiming of bells, and she clapped her hands and said, "How glad I am! I know what the bells are saying. It's Christmas morning." And she was so eager that she forgot to say her prayers, and she forgot to call good morning to the king, her father, and the queen, her mother. And she slipped quietly and quickly out of bed and ran barefooted down the marble stairs into the great palace drawing rooms to find what gifts the Christmas had brought her. As she pushed open the heavy door, she heard a sound like the rustling of wings, and it frightened her for a minute. But the Christmas bells rang clearly outside, and that gave her courage again, so she went boldly in. Ah, that was a beautiful sight. It was not yet broad day, but there was a soft light in the vast room that seemed to come from a great white pearl that hung from the center of the ceiling, and to be reflected from the broad mirrors on every wall. Ah, thought Theodosia, how I wish my present might be pearls. Then she looked again and saw around the hall tablets with golden letters, and on each was a name. There was the king's name, and the queen's name, and the name of everyone in the royal household. And under each was a heap of beautiful gifts. Her own name she could scarcely see, for it was far at the other end of the long hall, but she ran toward it, saying to herself, "I don't care what other folks are going to have. I want to see my pretty gifts." So at last she came to the tablet on which her name appeared. But alas, there was nothing under it, only a black leather bag, and upon it these words, "This is for selfish Theodosia." Still, she thought that perhaps it might contain something beautiful for her, and she quickly raised it from the floor, but it was locked, and there was no key, and all she found by looking carefully was another inscription engraved in small, fine letters in the steel of the lock. Quote, "I am worth much to him who can open me." End quote. The poor little princess stamped her bare feet on the cold floor with vexation and rage, and was ready to cry, only she was too proud, when suddenly she saw in one of the mirrors a dazzling and beautiful angel standing behind her. She was not frightened, for even in the glass she could see that he was kind and gentle. His garments were white as snow, and his face was fairer than the fairest picture ever thought of in a dream. Little Theodosia began to grow calmer as she saw his soft, clear eyes fixed upon her, and she turned herself to him at once and said, "I know who you are. You are the Christmas angel." And strange to say, at that moment she perceived that the great pearl no longer hung from the center of the ceiling, but shone upon the angel's brow. And he smiled a smile like sunshine, and then grew very grave and sad, and said to her, "Poor child, you do not know the secret that unlocks all treasures. But if you will come with me, we will find someone who can tell us." Then he held out his hand, and Theodosia put her hand in it at once, for she had no fear of him. Out through the door they went. It opened and shut of itself, and out through the great archway of the palace into the wide, wide world. It seemed to Theodosia that her feet scarcely touched the ground, and she did not feel the cold, for the warm hand of the angel sent a delicious thrill through all of her limbs. In one hand she grasped tightly the mysterious bag, and every little while she looked up at the beautiful face of the angel, upon whose brow the great pearl shone serenely like a star. As they passed through the quiet streets, they saw a few people stirring. Here and there, some good Christian hastened to the early Christmas service, and high up in the cathedral tower was a bright light, where the old sexton still rang merrily the Christmas bells. And as they walked, the angel began to tell her the old sweet story of the first Christmas day and the Christmas gift of the child Jesus, which the dear God made to the world he loved, and how the kings and wise men came from far countries with rich offerings in their hands, and how the very beasts of the stable and the field were moved with strange reverence, and how the angels sang for joy. Theodosia looked up and said timidly, "And were you there?" The angel seemed to be looking at some fair vision a long way off, as he said, lowly and sweetly, "Yes, I was there." And with that, he went on to tell how lovely was the child Jesus, so that all who looked upon him loved him, and began straightway to love one another also, and blessed the day when they saw the babe of Bethlehem. And finally, he stopped and said, "Little Theodosia, do you know the meaning of Christmas?" Theodosia was silent, for she knew that she had forgotten all this in her eagerness for her own pleasure. But she presently took courage and said, "I know it means that Christ is born into the world." And the Christmas bells sounded and seemed to say, "Peace on earth and goodwill toward men." By and by the angel stopped at a low cottage and opened the door. Then they went into the poor, cheerless room, but they were not seen, for one cannot see the spirits of heaven when they choose to be invisible. As for Theodosia, the angel covered her with the corner of his robe. There was a tallow candle dimly burning on the table, and a pale woman sat by it, sewing fast on a piece of work she had risen early to accomplish. A little boy, crying silently from cold and hunger, had crawled from his miserable bed into the corner and was trying to light a fire of chips and cinders gathered in the street. And the pale woman lifted her eyes to heaven, murmuring over and over again, as if it were the only prayer she could remember, "Give us this day our daily bread." Theodosia had never heard of such misery before. All her little troubles melted away from her mind, and she thought, "Oh, why can I not do something to help these poor people?" She could not bear to wait until she could just ask the king to help them. Just then she looked down, and behold, the bag had opened a little way of itself, and she saw the gleam of silver money in it. In an instant, and before it shut together again, without stopping to think, she scattered a handful of the money in the room. But wonderful to tell, the silver shower never struck the floor, but seemed to vanish in midair, and lo, A bright fire went leaping up the chimney, and on the table was food in plenty. And the little boy and his happy mother were thanking God and blessing their unknown benefactor. Theodosia felt happy too, and as the angel led her away, she thought the Christmas bells were saying, "Naked and ye clothed me, hungry and ye gave me meat. Verily I say unto you, he did it unto me." Presently they found themselves in an upper chamber in another part of the city. It was broad daylight now. There were a dozen little children in the room with scraps of newspapers and one or two tattered books from which they were learning to read and spell. And in the midst stood the teacher, a poor young factory girl who taught the little ones of the neighborhood every morning at daybreak before going to her work, because she would not let them go ignorant for want of her help. And Theodosia heard her say, "Now, let us get through with our lessons quickly, and then we will all go and have a Christmas holiday," looking at the fine things in the stores and the pretty ladies on the streets. Who knows? Perhaps the king and queen and the princess may ride by. When Theodosia heard this thought, she thought, "How I should like to help these little ones. They have no pleasure but in looking at the pleasure of other people." And the bag opened halfway of itself, and she saw there was gold in it. For a moment she hesitated, saying to herself, "With this gold I could buy myself the necklace of pearls that I wish so much to have." But just then the bag slowly began to shut up again, and she gave one look at the little children and quickly drew from it all the gold which she scattered in the room. And the room changed by magic into a beautiful schoolroom, and the happy children were wreathing it in green, and the teacher, no longer a poor factory girl, but a fair and gentle woman, was just about to distribute to them their Christmas gifts. And Theodosia wished so much to stay, but the angel drew her away. When they were once more in the streets, the angel said, "Do you know the secret now?" And Theodosia said nothing, but the Christmas bells rang out. "Not what we get, but what we give, makes up our treasure while we live." This time the angel lifted her from the earth and carried her swiftly over the whole land and over many other lands. And she saw how many people there were who did not yet know what Christmas meant. Yet many thousands of them had never heard of Christ who was born in Bethlehem. And her heart, that was so warm now with the Christmas love, could not bear to think of so much sin and sorrow. And this time she put her hand on the lock of the bag, saying to herself, "If there is any more of the magical money in it, I will throw it down upon this poor, unhappy, wicked world." The bag opened very easily, but there was nothing in it save a magnificent necklace of pearls. In vain she looked for silver and gold. She must either give up the necklace of pearls or nothing. So she took one look more at the beautiful gems and then flung them down upon the earth, and the necklace broke as it fell, scattering the pearls far and wide. And where every pearl fell, behold, there arose by magic a church or a mission school, and in all languages were heard the songs of thanksgiving from children and from old people. And the angel said to her, "Now see, your bag is empty. Are you not sorry?" But she looked straight into his kind eyes and said, "I have found the secret now." And the Christmas bells rang out. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Then the angel caught her to his bosom with great joy, and flying swiftly through the air, he brought her back to the palace of the king. And lo, in the great hall were all the gifts still piled, and the king and the queen had not yet come. So he carried Theodosia to the place where her name was, and behold, when she looked, there lay the black bag wide open and full of gifts innumerable, and on each gift some curious inscription. A beautiful bouquet of flowers bore the words, "These are the prayers of the poor," and upon a crystal goblet, "The disciples' reward." But most lovely of all was the necklace of pearls that hung from the tablet, every pearl bearing a single name like patience, gentleness, truth, innocence, and three pearls larger than the rest. And on the largest pearl, which was the very copy of the starry one upon the angel's brow, she read, "The greatest of these is charity." Then she knew what was the true name of the Christmas angel. And he vanished away, and she saw him no more. And she saw also that the black bag was like her own heart, which, when closed to charity, was of no use, but when open for the sake of others, grew richer in treasure all the time. And the Christmas bells rang once more. God so loved the world, and again, beloved, if God so loved us, then ought we to love one another. May the Christmas angel dwell with every one of us round and round the whole year. And so there you have the Christmas angel, story told by Civil War veteran Captain Rossiter Worthington Raymond. Merry Christmas. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.